So we have an adult discussion group after service. We just kind of circle the chairs here and we talk, and I can't always tell you exactly what we're going to talk about. We're supposed to be talking about the lesson, and sometimes it's not there. I mean, we don't talk about the lesson, and maybe we'll get a little more purposeful about it. But one of our members, Ann Dubois, and she's sitting back there next to Lori, I see her. For the last 2 or 3 weeks, she has mentioned a book that she's been reading. And, no, not a troublemaker, because what we've been talking about is that collectively, you and I get to make a choice. We get to make a choice about ourselves, and we get to make a choice, a collective choice about what Unity of Melbourne is going to be in the community. And so she's mentioned this book 3 or 4 times, and I couldn't remember the title of it. I found it this morning. Thank you, Ann. It's Younger Next Year. And she keeps reminding us that if our cells aren't stretched, and if we don't do exercise 6 days a week, if our cells are not stretched and challenged, that they will decay and die. Well, I didn't exactly remember what the name of the book was, so I started out looking for it, and I thought it might be Grow or Die. And there is a book by that title that says Grow or Die. And so I haven't read the book. I just found it on Amazon. But here are a few words from the book cover of Grow or Die. And the subtitle of the book is The Unifying Principle of Transformation. Grow or die. That is nature's single mandate. Impelled by the most basic and universal drive, the drive to grow, all biological, physical, chemical, psychological, and cultural processes are intrinsically equivalent. Everything, including love, must obey nature's command to grow or to perish. History in this sacred text, the Bible, consistently teaches us that life is about change, that from the very moment we are conceived, we begin to grow and to change. Growth and change are the only constant in our life. Think about how fast babies changed. I haven't seen my great-grandson Ben in 3 or 4 weeks. He'll be totally different. He'll be sitting up, I bet. Could be. All of us who are grandparents or great-grandparents can tell you that if you haven't seen your grandbaby in 3 months, you will be amazed at how much they change, sometimes as much as 3 weeks. And as children, were we not eager to grow and to change? Yes. Didn't we keep marks on the wall to see how tall we were? And we would celebrate our progression through the grades at school. How old are you? I'm almost 4. I'll be in 5th grade. But somewhere along the line, we start expecting certain things to stay the same. Because in fact, some things do tend to appear the same. As children, we don't think our parents ever change, do we, when we're little? And it seems to me that the older I get, the less I want things to change. The less willing I am to embrace change and growth. And truthfully, the change that I'm willing to embrace is the change that I can control. We want to control what changes and how it changes and when it changes, right? And we all know what sometimes happens, don't we? We plan, and the universe laughs. Went on a cruise this last week. Trivia before bingo. Love trivia. Love bingo. Can you imagine that on our last day, Friday, they put the last trivia and the last bingo at the same time? As I was getting off the boat and they handed me this form to give my comments, it was, don't put trivia and bingo at the same time. There was a father who was reading Bible stories to his young son, and he said, the man named Lot was warned to take his wife and flee out of the city, but his wife looked back and was turned into salt. And the son asked, what happened to the flea? And some of you may remember the story about Billy, who came home from Sunday school and his mother asked him what he'd learned in class. And he told her it was the story of the crossing of the Red Sea. Oh, she said, can you tell me the story? And Billy said, the Israelites go out of Egypt, but Pharaoh and his army chased after them. They got to the Red Sea and they couldn't cross it. The Egyptian army was getting closer. So Moses got on his walkie-talkie. The Israeli Air Force bombed the Egyptians, and the Israeli Navy built a pontoon bridge so the people could cross. And the mother was shocked. Is that the way they taught you the story? Well, no, the boy admitted. But if I told you the way they told us, you'd never believe it. And isn't that true about a lot of the Bible stories? So it's a good thing that Unity teaches us to interpret them metaphysically, not take them literally. I don't think I could stand up here and tell you that everything in the Bible is fact. I wouldn't. Even Jesus admitted that he spoke in cryptic language, that those who were attuned to his message would understand the meaning behind his words. Sometimes he even had to interpret his parables for his own disciples, those who he had handpicked, those who were closest to him. The stories in the Bible were written to convey one truth, that when we accept and know that God is alive and well within us, that we can move from allowing external circumstances to control us. We can move away from allowing external circumstances swaying our mood, making us feel a certain way. We can move to that place where we know that we are divine beings as well as human beings. To expect and accept that our ability, our power, and our creative abilities are from God. To know that and to live that way, to live from love and not fear. The Bible consistently teaches us that life is about change, and it's appropriate for it to do that, because all of life is about change. Most of the Bible stories tell us about some kind of change. The stories of Exodus, the Hebrew people, is a story about change. Remember how the Pharaoh didn't want to accept change? And then there's a story about Lot and his wife. And remember what happened to Lot's wife because she was resistant to change? And in the New Testament, there's the story of Jesus and the man at the pool at Bethesda. For the man to be healed, he had to be willing to be changed. Yeah. Each of these stories can be used to help us learn about how to handle change, because the characters and the events in these stories represent different parts of our own experiences in life. And so this morning we're going to look at another story and learn more about change. I gave away my copy of this book. I could not find it. I gave it away. The book is Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson. How many of you have read it? Great. You've all read it. Most of you, that's great. It's a wonderful book. It is a parable, a fable that applies to you and me. And the book is all about economic uncertainty and change. And so here is a condensed version of that book. Once upon a time in a land far away, there lived 4 characters who ran through a maze looking for cheese to nourish them and make them happy. 2 were mice, and they were named Sniff and Scratch. 2 were little people, characters who were as small as mice, but who looked and acted a lot like people today. And they were named Him and Haw. Every day, the 4 of them spent their time in the maze looking for their own special cheese. The mice looked for hard cheese that they could nibble, but the little people searched for a different cheese. Cheese with a capital C that would make them feel happy and successful. Sniff and Scratch used the trial and error method to find their cheese. It was a bit slow, but they always found it. Him and Haw, they used their ability to think and learn from the past to find their cheese. They sometimes made cheese-finding mistakes because of the way they looked at things. But eventually, all 4 of them found a huge stash of cheese in Cheese Station C, at the end of one of the corridors in the maze. I said Sniff and Scratch. I really realized it was Sniff and Scurry, I think. Sniff and Scurry or Scratch, whatever his name was, always believed that the cheese might someday run out. So they thoroughly enjoyed the time with so much cheese. Him and Haw, however, took possession of the cheese, sometimes even bringing friends in to see this huge stash of cheese, pointing to it with pride and saying, "Pretty nice cheese, don't you think?" Him and Haw felt that they deserved the cheese because they had worked so long and so hard for it. However, one morning, Sniff and Scurry arrived at Cheese Station C to find that there was no cheese. It had been moved. Now, Sniff and Scurry were not too surprised. The change was no big deal, and they quickly realized they had to change too. So they sniffed the air and immediately scurried off into the maze looking for new cheese. Later that morning, Him and Haw arrived at Cheese Station C, and they were totally unprepared for what they found. Him was furious. "Who moved my cheese?" he bellowed. He put his hands on his hips and his face turned red, and he screamed in the top of his lungs, "It's not fair!" You see, to him, finding cheese meant that he could become a big cheese, be in charge of others, and own a big house on top of Camembert Hill. For Haw, finding cheese meant feeling safe, having a loving family someday, and living in a cozy cottage on Cheddar Lane. Him and Haw spent many days trying to deal with the change at Cheese Station C. They kept thinking someone would bring the cheese back. And they decided to stay there so that they would be there when the cheese returned. They were immobilized by the change. Him thought that the two of them should get benefits because their cheese had been moved. We're entitled to our cheese because we didn't cause this problem. Somebody else did this, and we should get something out of it. Haas suggested that maybe the two of them should go ahead and look for new cheese, but him said, "Oh no, I'm going to get to the bottom of this." Meanwhile, Sniff and Scurry, after much trial and error, found Cheese Station Inn in part of the maze they had never visited before. And there was a humongous supply of cheese there. They were delighted, and they settled down to visit Cheese Station Inn every day. Day after day, him and Ha hung around Cheese Station C, growing weaker and more hungry, but still believing new cheese would show up. Until one day, Ha began to laugh at their predicament. "Ha, ha, ha," he laughed. "We keep doing the same things over and over and wonder why things don't get any better. If this wasn't so ridiculous, it would be funny." And Ha made the momentous decision that he was going to leave in search of new cheese. "Sometimes," Ha said to him, "things change and they are never the same again. This looks like one of those times. Life moves on, and so should we." But him was afraid, and he wouldn't go with Ha, so Ha struck out on his own. His journey was a difficult one with pitfalls and many dead ends, but he was determined to move ahead, and he discovered many important things about himself as he was searching. Every once in a while, he would stop and write on the wall his thoughts. He didn't want to risk forgetting what he was learning, and he hoped that the handwriting on the wall would help guide him if him ever decided to follow. Ha found some bits of new cheese here and there, but nothing substantial, nothing to sustain the two of them. And at one point, he even returned to Cheese Station C with some new cheese samples, hoping to entice him to continue the search. But him wasn't buying it. "I don't think I like new cheese," he told Ha. "It's not what I'm used to. I want my own cheese back. And I'm not going to change until I get what I want." Now Ha was disappointed, and he left in search of more new cheese. He continued to mark his thoughts on the wall, hoping that him would change his mind and follow. One day, Ha realized that he had let go of his past. He was adapting to the present, and he was focused on the future. He realized that fear no longer held on to him. He wasn't focused on what he feared. He was focused on finding new cheese and how much he was going to appreciate it when he found it. And on that day, he found Cheese Station Inn with the greatest supply of cheese he had ever experienced. There was so much cheese there that he didn't even recognize some of it. He'd never even seen some of these kinds of cheese. He found Sniff and Scurry there, and they were fat and happy, having been there a long time. After eating his fill of new cheese, Ha reflected on what he had learned about how to deal with change. And then he remembered his handwriting on the wall that he left for him, and he smiled as he recalled what he'd learned on his journey to new cheese. He learned change happens. They keep moving the cheese. Anticipate change. Get ready for the cheese to move. Monitor change. Smell the cheese often so you know when it's getting old. Adapt to change quickly. The quicker you let go of old cheese, the sooner you can enjoy new cheese. Change. Move with the cheese. Enjoy change. Savor the adventure and enjoy the taste of new cheese. Be ready to quickly change again and again, because they keep moving the cheese. When the story ends, we don't know if him ever got the message about change. But Ha was hopeful that one day his friend would arrive at Cheese Station Inn. Either way, in the story, you and I learn a lot about change. And I thought it's a good story for those of us who are facing change in our lives. We're certainly facing change in our congregation. Change always happens. Things don't seem the same thing. New management comes in and changes things, changes the way our work gets done. Maybe somebody sells the house we're renting. Someone we love leaves us. We lose our job. Our physical body breaks down and we're no longer able to do the things we used to do. Life is no longer the same. And the questions we always have to ask ourselves, is our cheese about to be moved? Is our cheese about to be moved? I needed to do this because, see, lots of changes are happening. In less than a little over a year or so, we've made the decision that we were going to move, and you know, in less than a year, we've bought a building. And we had plans for when we were going to move in that building, and they keep moving the cheese. We've sold our building, and in February, the people that have bought us want us to move our cheese. You know, lots of things are changing. And it's really hard to stay flexible. We get these notes from California. And we got a note where they asked us to assign our lease to their new institutional owner. And I wrote him and told him I really didn't want to do that. And you know, we didn't hear from him. Go figure. So last week while I was on a cruise, I got an email that said, can you talk to tomorrow on Thursday or Friday? And I emailed back, I'm on a cruise. and suggested that they talk to Barbara McIntyre, and they didn't call her back. Go figure. What I realize in this process is that, you know, I keep making plans and God keeps laughing. I know that change is not optional, that things change every second, every millisecond, and our goal, personal goal, and our goal for our group, or our congregation, is to be able to move and grow with change. To know that we can, because we know that God is with us through every change. That no matter what happens, there is only one presence and one power in my life and in the universe, God the good, omnipotent. Things change, and either we flow with them and see the blessing and the gift and move on in our life, or we get stuck at Cheese Station C, waiting for something to change back to the way it was. And the longer we do that, the longer we stay in misery and suffering. God's will for us is always good. God has abundance for us. And the everlasting truth is that sometimes we have to step out of our comfort zone. We have to leave Cheese Station C to get to Cheese Station N, where there is more cheese than we can possibly imagine. better cheese than we know about. And so it is.